Here comes the most powerful warship ever built. It's bigger than 3 football fields. But now, a missile costing just a few $1,000,000, like China's DF-21D, might be able to destroy it. And China is not alone. Many countries are building weapons designed for one purpose: killing aircraft carriers. If even one of these hits its target, the most powerful navy in the world could lose its greatest weapon. And everyone knows the world's biggest bully is actually the biggest joke. Imagine it's you who built the most powerful warship in human history. A floating city. More than 300 meters long. Carrying dozens of fighter jets. Powered by 2 nuclear reactors. And costing over $13 billion to build. And the name of the ship is the USS Gerald R. The largest warship ever constructed. The one you bragged about every day. But now, military analysts are asking you a terrifying question. What if a missile costing a few $1,000,000, say, from China, Russia, North Korea, and even Iran, could destroy it? How would you look at yourself? And would you be horrified to hear some experts saying the era of aircraft carriers may be ending? For nearly a century, aircraft carriers have dominated the oceans. They helped win World War II. They shaped the Cold War. And today, they form the backbone of the United States Navy. But new weapons are changing the rules of war. Hypersonic missiles. Drone swarms. Space-based surveillance. So the question is simple. Are aircraft carriers still the ultimate weapon? Or the biggest sitting ducks under the sun? To understand the debate, we need to go back to World War II. Before 1941, the most powerful ships on Earth were battleships. Gigantic vessels armed with massive guns. But when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor using carrier-launched aircraft, everything changed. Suddenly, range mattered more than armor. A carrier could strike hundreds of miles away using aircraft. A battleship could only fire as far as its guns allowed. Within a few years, aircraft carriers replaced battleships as the kings of naval warfare. And after the war, the United States built the most powerful carrier fleet in history. Today, America operates 11 supercarriers. Each one acts like a floating airbase. They carry 60 to 80 aircraft and operate as part of a carrier strike group, a formation that includes destroyers, cruisers, submarines, and support ships. Together, they can launch hundreds of air missions and strike targets deep inland. This ability to project power anywhere on Earth became the foundation of U.S. global dominance. But these ships come with a staggering price tag. Operating a carrier strike group can cost around $8 million per day. Which raises a dangerous question. What happens if a much cheaper weapon can destroy them? That's where the story takes a shocking turn. Now, let us look at the missile designed to kill carriers, developed by China in the early 2000s, specifically to destroy aircraft carriers. A missile called the DF-21D. Often nicknamed the carrier killer. The idea behind the weapon is terrifyingly simple. Launch a ballistic missile. Send it high into the atmosphere. Then guide it down toward a moving ship at extreme speed. The missile would dive from above the carrier's weakest point. If successful, even a single hit could cripple flight operations. And that's the key. You don't need to sink the ship. You stop it from launching aircraft. And suddenly the most powerful warship on Earth becomes a giant, helpless target. But the real shock isn't just the technology. It's the math. Because aircraft carriers are unbelievably expensive. The USS Gerald R. alone costs more than $13 billion to build. In sharp contrast, anti-ship missiles can cost a tiny fraction of that. Which creates a dangerous imbalance. A few $1,000,000 versus billions. That is what military strategists call the cost exchange problem. And it's one of the biggest threats facing modern naval power. But missiles are only the beginning. Because the real challenge to aircraft carriers is much bigger. Today, aircraft carriers face threats from multiple directions. Missiles. Submarines. drones, satellites, even artificial intelligence. Countries like China are developing long-range anti-ship missile networks designed to keep enemy ships far from their shores. This strategy is known as anti-access, area denial, or A2AD. Instead of defeating the enemy navy directly, you make it too dangerous for them to enter the region at all. Imagine an invisible wall of missiles stretching across the ocean. If a carrier crosses that line, it could face hundreds of incoming weapons. Meanwhile, drone technology is transforming warfare. In recent conflicts, relatively cheap drones have forced even advanced militaries to adapt. And naval forces are already encountering these threats. In the Red Sea, U.S. ships defending commercial shipping routes have had to intercept hundreds of incoming drones and missiles during ongoing attacks. That's hundreds of interceptions. Hundreds of missiles were fired. And hundreds of millions of dollars spent. Which highlights another problem. Defending against cheap weapons can be incredibly expensive. In some cases, a missile costing millions of dollars is used to destroy a drone costing only thousands. It is sometimes called the defense cost curve problem. In the previous video, we mentioned that the US is throwing diamonds at mosquitoes, and one viewer praised us for it, calling it poetry. We do not have to be poets to reveal the truth metaphorically, but it's forcing militaries around the world to rethink naval strategy. If aircraft carriers are vulnerable, why keep building them? And yet, that's exactly what many countries are doing. Which brings us to the biggest mystery of all. If carriers are obsolete, why build more? And it's the most surprising part. Despite all these threats, major powers are still building aircraft carriers. The United States continues to produce new carriers in the Ford class. Meanwhile, China is rapidly expanding its own carrier fleet. Even countries like the United Kingdom and India have invested heavily in carrier programs. Why? Because destroying a carrier is far harder than it sounds. First, carriers never travel alone. They operate within a carrier strike group. This defensive network includes destroyers equipped with advanced radar and missile defense systems. Submarines patrol nearby waters. Fighter jets provide air cover. Electronic warfare systems attempt to jam incoming threats. In other words, before an enemy missile can reach the carrier, it must survive multiple defensive layers. Second, targeting a carrier in the open ocean is extremely difficult. The ocean is enormous. And aircraft carriers move constantly. To hit one, an enemy needs an entire surveillance network. Satellites, radar, drones, reconnaissance aircraft. If any part of that targeting chain fails, the missile misses the target. Finally, carriers themselves are evolving. The U.S. Navy is developing new defenses against drones and missile attacks. For example, new interceptors like the Coyote and Roadrunner systems are designed to shoot down drone threats at a much lower cost. In other words, aircraft carriers are adapting. But the question remains: is adaptation enough? The truth is that aircraft carriers are neither invincible nor obsolete. Instead, they're entering a new phase of evolution. In the past, carriers could operate relatively close to enemy coastlines. Today, that may be too risky. As a result, future carriers may operate farther away from threats. They may rely on longer-range aircraft, unmanned drones, and distributed fleets of smaller vessels. Instead of being the center of the fleet, the aircraft carrier may become the command hub for an entire network of autonomous systems. In other words, carriers aren't disappearing. They're transforming. For nearly 100 years, aircraft carriers have defined global military power. They helped shape the outcome of World War II. They dominated the Cold War. And today, they remain one of the most powerful weapons ever built. But technology is changing. Missiles are getting faster. Drones are getting smarter. And the oceans are becoming more dangerous. So the real question isn't whether aircraft carriers are obsolete. The real question is, when the next major war begins, will the aircraft carrier still rule the seas? Or will it become the battleship of the 21st century, a symbol of power from a different era?